Default to the good, focus on other people, and when in doubt, look around and say, okay, where can I make a difference right now, today, to get me to stop thinking myopically and to start thinking about others. We can't control external factors. We can't control a hurricane. We can't control a lot of the things going on the planet, but we can control how we react to it and what our attitude is as we move forward.
In times of uncertainty, the right leadership can transform challenges into opportunities. Today, we're honored to share the insights of Dr. Mary Kelly, a dynamic leader with over 20 years of service in the U.S. Navy, where she retired as a commander. With multiple master's degrees and a PhD in economics, Mary brings a wealth of knowledge to her work as a high-energy keynote speaker, as well as an author of 15 business and leadership books. Her no-nonsense, relatable approach helps professionals navigate crises, embrace leadership roles, and drive success, all while weaving in humor and unforgettable stories from her military and corporate experiences. Mary's passion for helping others grow shines through in everything she does, offering invaluable lessons on thriving in the face of change. Mary, we're honored to have you here on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast.
Hey, Danny, I'm so excited to be with you and your listeners today, and I'm hoping I can provide some value and maybe some helpful tips along the way.
Well, I'm sure you can. I mean, in our pre-interview discussion, I know that you have a wealth of knowledge to bring. You've already brought me a lot of knowledge. I've written down a few things. So for our listeners that are out there activating their Strava app, you might also want to open up your Notes app and get ready to take a few or listen back to this once you get home. And I'd love to jump right in because you mentioned having optimism in times of adversity. That true optimism is about looking at a situation and thinking, I can make that better. And I can see that theme in the way you led in the military to the messages you share as a professional speaker now. How do you go about cultivating this mindset of optimism?
Well, we can't control everything. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now. If you look at the news, you wake up, you try to be an informed person, you watch the news, you look at all the geopolitical issues, you look at all the economic issues, you look at workforce issues, look at domestic issues, you look at what's going on in your community. It is so easy to get discouraged, throw up your hands and say, as my father used to say, the world is just a terrible place and there's nothing I can do. Except that's not true. People are mostly good. I realize not all of us have always come across all the good people, but people are mostly good. And most people are just trying to wake up every day, go to their jobs, provide for their families, and do the best they possibly can. So how do we, in the face of crisis and challenge and change, because there's plenty of it, how do we stay positive? How do we stay focused? And how do we influence other people right now is one of the things I am helping organizations and leaders with, because COVID made people sad. And this overwhelming sadness kind of permeated the workplace, and it permeated their homes, and it permeated their communities. And people have to get over the sad and stop wallowing in kind of that place of self-pity and being myopic. I saw some of this in the first Gulf War, the second Gulf War, when people got so myopic that they could not get out of their own head. So now what I do is I have a 6-stage process that walks people through a crisis or a challenge or a change, and then a 5-step process on how to pivot out of it.
That's really, really good advice. And I want to break down a little bit of it because, like yourself saying that you believe that most people are good, I always tell people most people have their own desires at the core of who they are. They're the hero in their own stories, and they don't see themselves as selfish. They don't see themselves as destructive. They see themselves as trying to provide for their basic needs, provide for their family. They're not doing anything wrong in their mind, even when they're doing something wrong. Is that how you would kind of describe most people are good? They're acting for the good of their community or the good of their family or the good of themselves?
Well, most people act in their own best self-interest, which they should. You have to take care of yourself. Survivalism is a very strong human trait. But I think most people also sometimes don't know how to reach out to other people. They're not sure if they've got the right tools or the right abilities or the right defaults. I talk a lot about defaulting to the good. So when I was on deployment, and I'll just share with your listenership, my whole family was military. My dad, my mom, they weren't military. But my older brother was a Marine, married Navy. My first husband was a Force Recon Marine. Number 2 was Navy. I'm working on number 3. I know it makes me sound bad. I've been widowed twice. I know what this
Mm.
looks like. And and some of your listeners have been out there too. And I understand what that is like. And none of them got shot or blown up on the battlefield. Cancer took them both out. Then my younger sister was Air Force. She married Navy. My younger brother was the Navy pilot in the family. So we've got the t-shirts, we've got it there. And I remember my parents being very worried when at one point we were all deployed. I said, Mom, Dad, you have to default to the good. Every day that you wake up, you're going to be thinking uncertainty in the what if game. You have to default to the good. You have to go, okay, my kids might be wherever they are, but they're trained. We know what to do. And that's one of the things I tell parents now too is don't worry about your kid. We know how to train them pretty well to survive. Like we're pretty good at this military thing. We're good at it. So default to the good. If there are two ways to take a statement, take the good way. A lot of people right now, again, if you watch the news, they're so willing to be offended by any little thing. They're so ready to be mad. They're so ready to be angry. And anger, especially if you go online and you're like, oh, I'm enraged by this thing, it gives people a little chemical rush of happiness. It makes people happy to be mad, but you can't live like that. So one of the things I always say was a rule for us is let's say you get a letter or a text or whatever, and you're deployed, and there's two ways to take it, and one way is bad and one way is good. You have to default to the good.
I love that you're teaching people default to the good because you're right. It's so easy, and we are so primed to turn to the negative when something happens. Something happens to us, not as I usually tell people, things happen for us. They happen for our good. And so if something happens, if I lose a job, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a difficult thing, but this is ultimately going to be good. And, having that mindset over has taken me many, many years and a lot of loss to be able to get to the good. How would you go about suggesting people learn to default this way?
In the first Gulf War, I saw how people reacted when things got tough. Stress exacerbates what we are and who we are. Stress, whatever your character flaws are, enough stress is going to bring those things out. Whether it's a death or just a real difficult situation, stress brings that out. And most people react in fairly predictable ways. So let's say it doesn't matter. You get a bad diagnosis. You get bad news about your job. Your boss is going to take another job and now you don't know who your new boss is. You got a new software system coming in. We have a global pandemic, whatever it is. Your first reaction is, oh no, you reject it. And again, partly military training, but partly because I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I taxonomize things based on acronyms, I number things, or I make everything begin with the same letter of the alphabet. So in these 6 stages, they all begin with the letter R, the same letter of the alphabet, so we can remember them. The first one is rejection. We reject it. Oh no, you got cancer. Oh no. The first thing you think of is, oh no. The second stage is the recognition stage. I need to recognize it for what it is. And what do I need to do that day? It's very much the Band-Aid fix. It's okay, my kid got into a fender bender. I need to go pick up the other kids at school. I need to go grab the car. I need to call the insurance company. Like, what do you need to do right now to survive the day? We got this diagnosis. Okay, we need to make medical appointments. Whatever it is, you figure out what you need to do quickly in that recognition phase. And then you get into the realization phase. Wow, this is a diagnosis that's not going away. Wow, we just took a hit in this part of the unit. Wow, this COVID thing is not going away. That realization kicks in where you realize it's going to take a lot more time, a lot more resources, and your leadership has to kick it up. This is where you have to be more proactive. You have to exert yourself and go, okay, let's be planning. This isn't going away tomorrow. That's that phase. And then the fourth stage is the resolution stage. And people naturally kind of fall into this. Okay, we can do it. If we rally together, we can do this. You're seeing this right now in some of the hurricane responses. People like, oh no, we can't believe we got hit. Okay, I'm not going to have power today. We might get power tomorrow. Okay, what happens if I don't get power and water and I need to somehow figure out a way to feed my family and we could be stuck up on this mountain for a couple weeks? Okay, we can do this together. They cycle through the reaction. And some people wake up every day with their coffee and they look at the world and they go, oh no, the world is a terrible place. Okay, I can get through the day because I have a job. all right, I need to be planning for the future. We can do this, and they're kind of resigned in this endless PowerPoint loop of the first four stages. The first four stages of the response to any crisis or challenge or change is myopic. It's inwardly focused. It's all about me, my house, my kids, my job, my community, my little league team, my little world. Really good leaders very quickly go beyond that to the R, the reality phase. We call it situational awareness in the military. Okay, you might be surrounded by three sides, and that's not good news, but you got to know what you're dealing with. You got to know what's going on. So that's the reality phase. Got it. Things are going to be harder. Got it. This is going to be tough. Got it. We've got a battle ahead of us. And that pushes you into the realignment phase, which is stage 6. And that's where my real leaders operate all the time. And that's externally focused. That's how do I support my people? What strategic actions do I need to take? How does this affect my strategic leadership? How does this affect where we're going as an organization, as a community? How do I help other people enact change? Not in a way where change is bad. A lot of times we're like, Danny, you need to change. Well, hang on. That implies that you're doing something wrong. No, Danny, maybe we need to transform something. Maybe we need to elevate something. Maybe we need to innovate something. How do we help people see externally instead of focusing internally? And I'm a big believer that a lot of times, a lot of the things we're seeing right now in certain sectors that are triggers for people, it's because you're so wrapped up in all this stuff in your own head, you can't see outside. So one of the things that's great for that, and we're certainly seeing this in some of the hurricane relief places, is people are getting out and helping their neighbors. They're like, you know what? I can't get to my own house, but rather than sit at the end of my road that's covered with trees, I'm going to go help my neighbors with a chainsaw and focus on them. It gets you out of your own head, and it's healthier. It's a healthier space to be. So once we realize that, there's just all kinds of stuff going on in here, and if we let this get so myopic, it's like that hurricane eye that gets narrower and narrower and narrower, and eventually sometimes it can start to spiral down, and we don't want that. So default to the good, focus on other people, and when in doubt, look around and say, okay, where can I make a difference right now, today, to get me to stop thinking myopically and to start thinking about others.
I love all of that, and I hope people listen to that back and hear the explanations, because I'm sitting here nodding along. Leanne's behind the camera, sitting there nodding along, going, yes, 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 yes. And then you get to the part where you start thinking externally. And that's a hard place, because a lot of people still feel like they don't have enough in their life. They still feel like they're lacking, or whatever they do have is going to be lost. And so I want to take it back a few years, because this transformation doesn't just occur in an instant. We can start building those habits, but for yourself, think back to a younger Mary. What was it that encouraged you to join the Navy and start putting something above yourself?
I was raised in a very patriotic family, but I'd never met anybody in the military. My big military experience was watching MASH. I'm not kidding. I had no idea that there were other services. I had no idea that there were service academies. I didn't know that you could start on an enlisted side or an officer's. Like, I had no idea. I had zero exposure to the military. But I was a motivated kid in high school, and I looked around and they said, we've got these things called service academies, and we can get you into these things, and then you have a career. I was like, well, that sounds good, because I was going around to college campuses, and there was just no purpose. People are wandering around, not moving too fast, not moving with any sense of purpose. And I thought, wow, people are wasting a ton of time. I'm like 16. I'm like, wow, people are wasting a lot of time. They're just wasting their lives. What are they doing? And one very nice college offered me this lovely scholarship, and I'm so grateful to it. But they gave me this scholarship based on not very much information. I'm like, well, this is who you're offering scholarships to. You can't be a very good school. And I thought, I want more. I want something more challenging. I want something that's going to be harder. I want something that's going to be more interesting. And I want something with purpose. So I was very, very fortunate that I got into the Naval Academy, was able to graduate. I am that 50% of the class that makes the top 50% possible. That would be me. That is me. And and then I really had no idea what a military career would be. Like a lot of people, I thought, well, if it's horrible, I only owe 5 years, and then I can always get out. And it turns out the first couple tours in the military, and your listeners know this, you're at the bottom of the heap. Things get better as you stay in longer. You're not at the bottom of the heap. You get to make more decisions. You get to enact more influence. You get to make better decisions, and things get better. So every time I thought about getting out, which was every tour, I'd just look around and then go, well, but what's my option? And then the detail would go, well, what about this? Or what about this? And I thought, well, that sounds fun. And because I was that kid who didn't know what to do, I didn't wake up when I was 6 years old and go, oh, I'm going to be a pilot. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be an accountant. I'm a lot older than that now. We won't use that word, but I still don't know exactly what I want to do when I grow up. And the military just kept going, you can change jobs. This is great. And for me, this was awesome. And I got great advice from one person, and they said, never let one job, one geographical location, or one bad boss make your career decision for you. Because sometimes people get a bad boss, they're like, okay, I'm getting out. Well, hang on. Is it really that bad boss? It could be you. What is it? And I've been lucky to have good bosses and bad bosses. I've been lucky to probably be the good boss and the bad boss. And a lot of it is what you are able to control. And we can't control external factors. We can't control a hurricane. We can't control a lot of the things going on the planet, but we can control how we react to it and what our attitude is as we move forward.
That's such a good reminder about the things that we can and cannot control. I mean, how do you go about from becoming a plebe to a commander? Well, you focus on the things that you can control. You maintain that positive attitude. I see too often in the lives of my peers and people that I've known throughout my life, be stuck at a position in life, whether it's a lower rank, whether it's a certain job, or they just can't seem to break through a barrier that is seemingly holding them back, and they start blaming others. How do we get away from that blaming to then move up the ranks and go, nobody's holding me down from the top. If anything, people at the top are trying to lift us up to raise them up, because we know if we can raise others up, society, our community, our family is going to be much better for it.
That is true. Now, I just want to make sure that your listeners understand, I've worked for horrible bosses, people who made mistakes, blamed their people who talked badly about their own people who didn't deserve it, people who are just horrible human beings who happen to be in positions of authority. I have worked for those people too. We all probably have. But it's our choice on what we do with that. So I remember being a young officer, and there was an older, wiser person, and we all knew the big boss was making some bad decisions. And I said, well, do we all see this? And she goes, yeah, we all see it. And I said, well, what do we do about it? She says, Mary, she says, you don't make those mistakes when you get into that place. I'm like, oh, like there's nothing I can do now. And she goes, nope, nothing right now. She goes, you make the best of the situation now, and you don't make those mistakes when you get there. I was like, there's some wisdom there. Okay. Because we can't control everything. What we can control is our community. If people work for you, you can control that workspace. If you are in a community, you can control how you interact in that community. You control your generosity with other people. And you mentioned something, Danny, about sometimes we don't always realize what we have. Back at the Naval Academy, my roommate at the time had our company, about 120 people, sponsor 2 children through the Christian Children's Fund, which is awesome. That has now become an organization called Unbound. It's based out of Kansas City. And about every year around this time, I have it on my calendar to relook the sponsorships that I do for this organization. I've been doing this since college, because the sponsorships are $40 a month. And for $40 a month, you can actually change somebody's life. They get medication, they get to buy chickens, they get to buy food for $40 a month. You can give more, which is awesome. And sometimes we get a scarcity mindset because we don't pull our head out of the ground like a little prairie dog and look around and go, wow, am I going to miss $40 a month? I'm really not. And why wouldn't I do this? Sometimes we need that reminder of how lucky we are.
Absolutely. Speaking of lucky, and where I've noticed other people struggle, and I'm sorry that I keep on bringing up the struggles, because usually I'm the person sitting in your seat saying, putting that positive spin on it, right? So I'm going to bring up some other difficult areas for people. A lot of veterans specifically, but people experiencing transitions. And for veterans, it's really easy to point out leaving the service, whether you've served 2 years or 28 years. It's something we've never done before. It's difficult. You have people sitting there telling us how hard it's going to be, and then you have other people saying this is going to be the best thing that's ever happened to you. And there's a lot of misinformation or miscommunication, and primarily missed opportunities for changing our lives and preparing this setup. How did you go about preparing for your own transition after such a long and successful career?
Well, you're kind to call it a long and successful career. I was lucky, and I knew there would be a day that I got out. I feel like my military world was very important to me, and I loved my career most days. I mean, there were days that were terrible. There were months that were terrible. There were weeks that were hard. I remember just being tired when I retired, just tired. I think I slept for 3 months. I was just tired because I really gave it my all. Okay, great. So then, how do you prepare yourself for life afterwards? Here's where I think a lot of our veterans struggle. And again, I've seen this in my own family, that the military, right, wrong, or in the middle, it gives you a sense of purpose. You have a sense of purpose. And a lot of people don't have that. Or they get out and they're working for a major big blockchain organization and they think, I went from saving lives to this, and these are the things that people are worried about. And again, in my civilian world, somebody will say, this is a really critical thing. I'm like, did anybody die? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, they were having a good day. And they're like, how can you say that? I'm like, because nobody died and we're still having a good day. So we're fine. We're used to dealing with higher stakes. And let's face it, when those higher stakes sometimes go wrong, that's a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. We're used to having that sense of purpose. I do use an acronym for this. It's called PIVOT. I know we're so tired of acronyms, but I love the pivot because you have to reinvigorate with your own sense of purpose. How am I going to be a great dad, a great father, a great coworker, a great fill in the blank? You still have a responsibility to be a great community member, even if you're not in uniform. The second part of that is you have to be ready for the opportunities and say yes, even if you don't think it's going to be a thing. So how I got into the world I'm in now was very accidental. I was back teaching at the Naval Academy. It's my last tour. I started out my career in intelligence, hunting Russian submarines and Chinese submarines, then the Republican Guard, then terrorists, and then I was a chief of police, and then I ran Pearl Harbor with a team, and then I was an HR director and all that stuff. So I had all that. And you just never know what's going to happen. And the one thing I did right was, again, I left the Naval Academy feeling pretty stupid because those are smart people who go to that school, apparently. And I was nowhere near the caliber of most of my classmates. And I just kept, whenever possible, taking classes and taking classes and taking classes in all different things because I had no idea what I was going to do afterwards, but I knew I needed to be smarter than apparently I thought I was. So I just kept taking classes. And so eventually you take enough graduate school classes, it winds up being a couple degrees. So yay team. So I feel like in that way, I was getting myself ready to say yes to opportunities. But then a lot of the yeses are extra work. So when I got to the Naval Academy, I checked in with the public affairs officer, as you do. And the public affairs officer said, hey, sometimes we get speaking requests from the outside, and they always want the admiral. The admiral's usually busy. Can you do any of these? And at that time, I had already been in front of a lot of people. I'd run a schoolhouse. I was used to doing training. I was used to doing all those things. And I said, sure, I can do that. And they said, okay, what do you got as a topic? I said, okay, I can do a talk on the status of the U.S. Navy and global forward presence. Nobody ever asked for that. I said, I can do an economic snapshot of where the United States is and how you fit into that. Nobody cared about that either. And I said, okay, so the fun one I have is called Master Your World. It's dog-inspired leadership lessons to improve productivity, profit, and communication. Boom. People thought that was amazing. And I did it because they said, well, what else do you know about? I said, okay, I know about dogs. I know about alcohol, also leadership. And they were like, how about dogs and leadership? I go, okay, I can put that together. So I threw this program out called Master Your World. And people just thought it was great. And I thought, okay. And so I would show up and I didn't think too hard about it. I had no PowerPoint. I had no sense of organization. And I would talk about how we lead people like we lead dogs. Oh, here's some shocking things. Reward good behavior when you see it. When the dog does something right, who's a good boy? Who's the best boy ever? Who's a good Danny? Good Danny. Here's a little treat. And then Danny repeats it. And then you get more good behavior out of Danny, the dog, Danny, the man. It works. Reward good behavior when you see it. Don't reward bad behavior. If the dog is chewing on your hand and it's a pit bull and it's a pit bull puppy, you don't let it chew on your hand, because then it realizes it's okay to chew on human skin. And now you're allowing bad behavior that could be dangerous when the dog is an adult dog. The third rule on that is be consistent. If you don't want the adult dog to do it, you don't let the puppy do it. If it was okay today, it should be okay tomorrow. Don't let something continue if it's not okay. Stop bad behavior as soon as you see it, because if you don't, you're tacitly condoning it. Those are my three main points. And people just thought this was genius stuff. So then people started calling up going, hey, can that commander person come talk to our group? And I said yes every time, even though it was nights and weekends and driving into DC and driving to Baltimore and sometimes driving into New York on my off time. But I said yes to the opportunity. And that's what happened. Enough people said, oh my gosh, you're kind of good at this. You could make a career of this. I go, hang on, this is not a job. You cannot make a living by talking. This is not a job. And they said, if you have something to say, you actually can. I'm like, okay. And then I thought, well, when I retired, I thought, well, how hard can this be? I'm a woman who likes to talk. I have degrees that back it up. I might have something valuable to say. If I don't, I'll try it for 3 to 5 years. If that doesn't work, I'll do something else. But I was confident that if it didn't work, I could do something else. I thought I can always get a job. And then I went to job fairs and I applied for certain things. And I had people say, well, how do you feel about being this position for this organization at this thing? And I said, well, I could do that. What that taught me was just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. It's like being pregnant. Just because you can get pregnant doesn't mean you should get pregnant. I'm just saying, just because you can do anything doesn't mean it's what you should do. Ideally, you align what you're good at and what people will pay you for with something you want to do. A lot of people give kids terrible advice. They're like, follow your passion. That's terrible advice. Oh, you can do anything. No, you can't. I am an old lady. I am 5'7", and people will say, you can do anything you want. No, I can't. I cannot go play pro basketball. I cannot go play pro sports. I am giving up my dream to be an Olympic gymnast because I can't do a cartwheel. No, you can't do everything. You're bad at a lot of things, but figuring out what you're good at and then figuring out where people will pay you for that talent and then figuring out how that will make you happy and how you can contribute to society, boom, that's what's hard. And it's okay to try different things and explore different opportunities. Before you get out, volunteer with organizations so you kind of know what organizations do. Figure out what kind of people you want to work with, who resonates with you, who you resonate with. Ideally, you would be the square peg in the square hole, and it would just be this perfect match. Except it usually takes a few tries to get that right.
I feel like I'm talking to somebody that's been a friend for forever and that we've had this conversation many times over because, one, the dog inspired leadership. Like, let's just face it. Dogs are amazing, super teachable, just like people. And when you were saying, good boy, Danny, good boy, I'm like, yep, nope, I've been treated like that and I appreciate it. It's not a bad thing, right? And then I tell people, when I was leaving medicine specifically from the healthcare side, people were just like, well, why aren't you going to go on to be a nurse or a physician's assistant or eventually a doctor? And I said, just because I'm good at something doesn't mean that that's what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't find a lot of enjoyment in it on a personal sense. On the purpose sense, I felt a lot of fulfillment. But when it came to the day-to-day interactions, I was just like, just because I'm good at it doesn't mean that it's what I should be doing. And I had to continue to search and try out different avenues until we finally landed in here saying, hey, we have this podcast where we get to share valuable insights from people like yourself with an audience that is hungry for this type of knowledge because they need more positivity. They don't need more comedy in their life. They don't need more distraction. They don't need more people chewing in their ear about how horrible military life was or romanticize it either, because life is happening now. It's happening in the moment, and we need the tools to be equipped to go forward and do it. And I love that you even mentioned give it a few years, because transitions take time. I mean, I'm in the middle of a transition from moving off the road back to my home here in Hawaii, and it's been a transition being gone for 2 years and going, okay, like at any moment I'm ready to jump off again because I'm ready to go full time and to being on the road and interviewing people like yourself live and in person once more. However, right now we're here and this is a great place to be. And I know that over time we'll see what the fruits of this are going to be. Um, so with all of that, with your acronyms, with your 6 stages, how do you go about identifying when you need to implement either your 6 stages of crisis management? Because sometimes a crisis can start out and it doesn't seem like an actual crisis. Like for a lot of people that haven't ever experienced a true transition in their life, that can be a crisis time. And so, being able to identify it for what it is, maybe pivot doesn't work at that time, and they need to step into that.
Yes, and thanks for mentioning that. When I went through the transition, whatever program we had to do, I was sitting next to some of my classmates. And the instructor, who is, I'm pretty sure, as old as Moses, said, okay, so, and it was, you got to remember, I came in the 80s and I retired in 2008. And he says, okay, I'm mostly talking to the gentleman. There's only me in the room who's not in that category. He says, tell your wives to stop spending money. And they all write down, stop spending money. I'm like, you're kidding me. And he goes, y'all all need to create a budget. My buddies are writing down, create a budget. I'm like, okay. And then he goes, and then he says things like, make sure you understand what you absolutely have to make. They write down. I'm like, y'all haven't done this already? And so we're at lunch and they're like, Mary, you don't understand. And I'm like, okay, tell me what I don't understand. And they said, we never really thought about it. We never planned for a budget in our household. I'm like, okay, that's a bit of a problem. And then they said, and we didn't set money aside. I'm like, why not? And they're like, one guy very honestly said, I kind of didn't think I'd live this long. Okay, fair point. But now you did. And what if you do live this long? You got to, save. You save 10% minimum, and then you save till it hurts, and then you save some more so that when you get to this place, you're not desperate. And you and I see the same requests, I'm sure, all the time where veterans get out with nothing. They didn't save. They didn't plan. They somehow thought somebody would pick them up or they would have no transition time. And one of my classmates, he says, Mary, you don't understand. He goes, I can't miss a paycheck. I'm like, what do you mean you can't miss a paycheck? He said, well, could you live if you didn't have income? I said, yeah, but I've been saving for this, my whole career. My husband, we save money, we put money aside, we don't go out to eat, we don't take expensive vacations, we don't live a lavish life. And he goes, see, we did all that. I'm like, okay. He goes, and now I am so stressed out. I've got migraines and my stomach is upset all the time. And I don't want to talk to my wife about it because she'll think I'm blaming her. And this is causing a problem in our marriage. And I don't know what to do. And I don't think, sadly, his is an unusual situation. So I think I was a little bit better prepared simply because I was an economist and I did the math. And what happened is every time I would learn something in one of my graduate classes, I would take it into the workplace. I would go, oh, my people don't have budgets. So I would create an Excel spreadsheet that did all the math for them. Go, look, hey, I put together this budget sheet and I thought it might be helpful for y'all. So here's what you think you're spending on things. And here's at the end of the month what you're actually spending. And then here's the delta. It's going to pop up in red if you're not, if you're not making those numbers. So I'd been doing that for years with my sailors. And so I was a little bit better prepared than I think some people were on the financial part. And that is a huge part of this. So you got to think about that day when it comes, and you can't think, oh, a couple weeks ahead of time, I'll start thinking about it. No, you have to financially prepare, number one. Number two, you have to mentally prepare. Why are you getting out? Some people get out for exactly the wrong reasons, or because they're mad at their current boss, or because their family members are like, what are you doing? You're going on yet another deployment. When are you going to grow up and get a real job? Or they'll let other people coerce them into thinking that their current military career is somehow bad. And then they get out and then they resent it. And then they resent their spouse or their family, whoever convinced them that this is a bad idea. And now they're unhappy. We've all seen that too. Third, I've seen people who get out because their buddy offers them a job they can't refuse. Oh, and then this goes back to, okay, is your buddy successful in business? No, not yet, but they've got a great idea. Okay. I love the idea that you take a chance on your buddy, that you got each other's backs. That's all great. But is this somebody who you want to put your future in their hands? And I guess that's one of the things that I liked about the path I took was I wasn't depending on anybody else. It was me. If I worked hard, I could make a living. If I worked really hard, I could make a better living. And in the military, you'd work really hard and sometimes you'd get a medal and maybe a promotion. But mostly, if you worked really hard in the military, a lot of times you just got more work because everybody knew, it was Danny. Danny's done a great job. We're going to give Danny more work. That's how this works.
Hmm.
So I like the idea that I control my destiny. I can starve or I cannot, and it's all dependent upon me and the actions I take. So I like the idea of being an entrepreneur. I started the business the day after I retired, and I was like, I didn't know how to start a business, so I made checklists. And I did this in the military too. Every single time I got a good idea in the military about any job or anything, I made a checklist out of it because you got to remember there's a lot going on up in here, and there's no guarantee I'm ever going to get that thought again. So it needs to be in a checklist. And I just created a check. I was like, okay, if I'm going to create a small business, what would be the checklist? And I looked around, there wasn't a checklist. So I wrote it. I thought, okay, I'm starting a small business. What's my checklist? And that's what several of my books have been. They're literally books of checklists. The one, it's called Better in 52 Weeks. And it's how to grow your business. And you focus on one thing, one form, one every week. There's a different form. And you focus on that. And suddenly your business is better in a year because you focused on one thing every week to make that business better. And then those become habits and those become ingrained. And then you move forward. And then you also remember, I'm like the biggest geek on the planet. Transitioning takes study. And so I read books, and I read a lot of books. My first year out, I probably read 100 books. I read constantly, and I'm working 12 hours a day, and I'm reading books and I'm exploring things, and I'm trying to figure out what I don't know and what I needed to know that would help. What I think a lot of people do when they get out is they stop and they waste time. And then it's kind of like going to school. If you ever stop going to school, it's very hard to go back into getting it. People go, oh, I'll take a semester off. I go, no, you won't. You just quit. I'm like, no, I'm really just going to take a semester off. No, they never go back. And I say never, very few people do because you get out of the habit. It's like going to the gym. If you're used to going to the gym every day and then you go, oh, I'll take a couple months off going to the gym. All of a sudden, 5 years later, you haven't been to the gym. Once you stop those healthy habits, it's really hard to get started again. So I encourage people to establish healthy habits now and keep the healthy ones, get rid of the bad ones, but keep some of those healthy habits that you know you should have and keep the work ethic. That was the one thing COVID taught us. The folks who struggled during COVID, it wasn't people my age. We already had the work habits in place. It wasn't the senior millennials. It wasn't the boomers. It was the 20-year-olds who were like, wait a second, I'm now responsible for my entire schedule and I'm working from home. And they couldn't seem to put the schedules together because they just didn't have those habits in place from decades of having habits. And this is where I think I was luckier than most. And the last thing on that is don't waste time. You can take time to do certain things, but every day you need to have a plan for what you're going to do. Otherwise, and I saw people do it. I had relatives do it. They sat on the couch and watched TV all day and they called it looking for a job. No, they weren't. And they said, well, I'm unemployed. No, you're not. You're just a bum. You're just not working. And let's be honest. No, I'm unemployed. No, you're not. You're watching TV all day. You're still in your pajamas. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and you started drinking at noon. Like that's kind of the definition. Get off the couch and start taking some positive steps forward.
Mary, you're absolutely incredible. I want to address the elephant in the room because I don't even know if I've read 100 books in my life that I wasn't required to. So for fun, like I go on kicks where I read some nonfiction, I read some fiction, but often I'll start a book and then I'll forget to finish it. But you've also written a lot of books, and a lot of them throughout the years have been about leadership, particularly the attributes of successful leaders. And I love that you wrote a book called Why Leaders Fail, because a lot of the people talk about successful leadership and what successful leadership looks like. I mean, I've even read books that said failing forward, but I haven't read something that focuses on necessarily how leaders have not shown up and how they can go about correcting some of the mistakes. Would you mind expanding upon this book just a little bit to give me a little bit of a more of a taste?
Oh, thank you so much. There are millions of books out there on how to be a great leader. And I know because I've written some of them. But I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if I could get data that shows realistically why good people put in a leadership position fail? Like, why do well intentioned, good people who want to do a great job, why are they failing? Why are they having struggles? So I went out with my co author on this one. His name is Peter Stark, brilliant man out of San Diego. And we surveyed over 100,000 people in 74 industries across several companies, over 200 companies. And we asked them questions like, why are you not more productive? Why are you not giving 100% at work? What is getting in the way of you not being better, working harder, being more effective? Is it your boss? Is it your boss's leadership? Is it the organization? Is it tool? Like, what is it? We got all these responses back. We taxonomized them, 7 categories. These are the 7 prescriptions for leadership success. And then we took those prescriptions and we went back to their leaders and to about 10,000 leaders. And we said, hey, these things might be issues. Do you think these are issues in your organization? And leaders, by and large, you know what they said? No, we don't have these problems. We're like, oh, this delta, this gap, all of a sudden that was the gold mine. And we thought, well, if we could take that gap and narrow the gap, wouldn't that be great? And Peter and I were talking, and he said, leadership is hard. And I said, yeah, it's hard. It's only hard if you really care. If you don't care about your people, your clients, your customers, your soldiers, your sailors, your airmen, Marines, if you're just sitting in the big chair to get all the glory, collect the paycheck, and you really don't care, yeah, leadership's real easy. But if you do care and you're trying to do a great job, then it's hard. And he says, yeah, and the people we work with, they really care. They want to do a great job. I said, yeah. And he goes, we need to make it easier for them. So that's where these 7 prescriptions came from. And we went out and then we taxonomized these things. The number one most popular thing was leaders inadvertently break trust with their people and they don't even know they're doing it. They'll say offhanded things like, I'll get back to you on that. And then they never do. People interpret that as a lie. There'll be leaders who blank out things on their calendar, like every Wednesday afternoon from 1 to 4, and their employees assume that they're golfing. They're not. They're at their own leadership program. They're trying to be better leaders, but they don't share that with their employees because they don't want their employees to think, oh, I don't have all the answers. That some leaders simply, they didn't know the difference between asking about, hey, how is Danny doing, with, hey, have you heard Danny's not doing very well? There's a difference there. There's a difference between getting information because you care and gossiping because you're being a jerk. And sometimes it's very subtle. So that's one of our most popular chapters, is the chapter on how to build and retain trust and things that people do that inadvertently sabotage their own success. Some other leaders are not perceived as being fair. Sometimes they're being very fair. They just can't tell people what they're doing to be fair. So people just interpret that they're not being fair. And that was a big issue. Some leaders are so worried about being liked that they fail to make hard decisions and people just lose respect for them. They're trying to be Miss Congeniality and it just doesn't work. So that's a really fun program. The book is good. It's for my more senior people who really want to examine what they're doing, both good and bad. There's another leadership assessment that goes along with that in that book called Why Leaders Fail. And that's one of the ones that I think is going to be, that's, like I say, I've got about 20 books out there. About 10 are really good. That's one of the better ones. And again, partly it's because I did it with Peter Stark. And people always ask, well, why in the world would you write a book with your closest competitors? Because in a lot of businesses, you would never do that. You would never collaborate with your closest competitors. And I try to look around, Danny, and I go, okay, who's smarter than me? Okay, lots of people. Who's smarter than me? Who's better than me? And who can I partner with so that my end product is going to be even better? And when you can find these people, oh, you hang on to them for forever. So there was never a discussion about, well, who's going to pay for what? How are we going to break up the royalties? Who's going to get paid? Nope. Neither one of us cared. We were just excited to work with each other. And that book turned out really well. And that gave me kind of the confidence to write the book, Who Comes Next, about leadership succession planning with Meredith Elliott Powell. And that's now leading to our the next project, which is You Next, which is for my 25 to 35-year-olds who are trying to map out their career and they're just not quite sure what to do next. And so it kind of walks people through some things to do. Okay, if you want to get to here, how do you get there? If you're not sure of where you want to go, how do you get there too? How do you figure these things out? It's all about figuring it out. So I'm excited about that. That'll come out hopefully in about 2025, January 2025. There's no hope it's going to get done. I promise it's going to get done.
This is where great leaders differ because you're still leading. From when I view leaders, they are more focused on the relationships that they have with not just the people next to them, not just the people underneath them, but the community as a whole. You have relationships with other leaders in the leadership training realm where you're sitting down together saying, hey, how can we make our community a better place? Let's combine our heads together. Let's work together. Let's find creative solutions to problems that we may not even know actually exist. And let's do the research because, I mean, as an economist, you know how to do research. You know how to connect the numbers. You know an analysis. And as an author, you know how to put that into plain language and teach people, hey, this is how you do it. I know coming from the enlisted side, like one of the things that I love about this is that I get to talk to both enlisted and former officers, as well as various subject matters throughout different disciplines. And when I sit there and I look at the way that people describe enlisted job descriptions, it's middle management, it's entry level stuff, it's your yard workers, it's your manual labor. If you're lucky, you can be, you're not going into the CFO, CEO mindset. But from what I've seen is that a lot of enlisted people want the opportunity to be leaders, not because they want the big comfy chair, but because they also want to build up their community. And that's also true for officers. You want to build up your community. You don't want to just do the power grab and get the prestige because that's what you're aiming for. And so for people looking for leadership roles in the civilian world, when they're coming out, enlisted officer, whoever it is, or somebody that's just looking for a new career opportunity, how would you suggest they start to stand out other than go get your books, learn what it takes to be a leader? But what's something that you could say, hey, if you're looking to transition into leadership, this is how you can do it?
So the great thing about right now is sentiment for the military right now is very high in the country. We've all been told thank you for your service, and it's lovely when people say that because when my husband came back from Vietnam, that was not the experience he got. So it's lovely when people say that, and then people will sometimes take it a step further, and they're saying, "What can I do to support the military?" I'm like, "Hire them." And I caveat that. I say, "Look, not all of us are angels. A lot of us aren't, but." When people say, well, I've got a morale problem, or I've got a problem with people not understanding mission, or I don't understand, this is an issue in my workplace. Like, how many former military people do you have? And they're like, oh, none. I'm like, you might want to sprinkle a little military into that and get things moving in the right direction. And it doesn't really matter. And you got to remember, there's a lot of people out there who are like me, where we watch MASH and we really don't know the difference between the officer and enlisted side. So when we look at your resume, all we want to know is, can you do this job and the job that this job is going to evolve into in the future? And the answer, and I would say predominantly, is 100% yes. And they don't care if you're an officer enlisted. Nobody knows. They don't know the difference. So unless you come in with a chip on your shoulder going, oh, well, I was never able to do this in the military because, the man held me down, or whatever the excuse was. If you come in and go, yeah, I got this. People will take that confidence and let you run with it. And I would just say, have more confidence in your ability to do the things that people need to get done than most people have, because you have that. And people kind of underestimate that. Um, and and again, people will take how you present yourself. If you show up and you are confident without being arrogant, being confident, and you've done the research, you know who you're talking to, you know what the questions are, you know what the job description is, and you can articulate, hey, here's 3 ideas I had. I was just thinking about this job and what I would do if I got this job. I would do this and this and this. All of a sudden people go, oh, you're a strategic thinker, you're a problem solver. That's what we want. We can teach anything else. We can teach technical skills. We can teach that all day long. What we need are thinkers. We need problem solvers, and we need doers. We need people who are going to show up and get things done. And I've always been that way. I find great talent and I'm like, you're hired. They're like, what am I going to do? I'm like, I don't know. We'll figure that out. I just want you on the team. I want you on the team and we're going to make things happen. Because once you find great talent, you hang on to them. My business manager, and one of the great things about the military is you also know where you're bad. And my business manager, I hired her the day I started the business, and it took me a while to be able to afford her, but I needed her right away because I was that was not my skill set, and I needed somebody who was really technically oriented for a few certain things. And she has been my best investment. She has been with me since day one. She is still with me, and I will tell you, I was building my own website. It's a terrible idea. And it's Saturday and I got football on and I am not able to do this one thing. And I was struggling with it for 3 hours. And now is when I'm starting to swear. Now I'm going to be the sailor and I'm doing all that stuff. And it's Saturday afternoon and I sent her a note. I'm like, I don't know if you know how to do this, but I am trying to do this to this to this. If you have any ideas when you come in on Monday, please let me know because I'm I've been spending way too much time on this. Friday, so it's Saturday afternoon. I log off. I went into the kitchen, came back. I think I came back to get Cheetos. And by the time I came, I was gone for 3 minutes. She comes back and goes, "Oh, Mary, do you mean like this?" And here's the web link. I'm like, mm. Yeah. So hire for what you're not. And you don't have to be great at everything, but you got to recognize where you're bad and then hire for those deficiencies. And a lot of people sometimes they're like, well, I'm coming into this job and they're asking me to do this and this and this. Okay, just because you're responsible for doing it doesn't mean you have to do it. Right now, with the outsourcing opportunities, somebody goes, well, part of my job is making flyers and I don't know how to do that. So I don't think I want to apply for the job. I said, are you kidding? You can hire somebody to do that for you. They're like, well, the company won't pay for it. I'm like, of course they shouldn't pay for it. It's your job. So get it done. You can outsource things. And they're like, oh, I didn't think of that. So there's ways to do things. But mostly right now, my executives are saying, Mary, I just find me people who can get things done. Find me people who can think. Find people who can solve problems. That's military people, 100%.
And that thinking ability is trainable. A good education goes a long way in learning how to think. I mean, that's a lot of what college did for me, at least. Like it taught me how to think differently. It also showed me that I can hold myself accountable to a schedule and complete something because, for the most part, your schedule is your own. Yeah, you have your class times, but nobody's making you show up. The school's still going to collect the money, and I love that you tell people, hey, you can outsource your job. It's a very true thing. And then you just work that into your salary or future salary negotiation saying, hey, I can accomplish this and this is why I'm worth it. The other thing that I know about leaders is that they have a lot of empathy for people that they lead. And one of the fears in hiring veterans is, there's a well-known statistic that veterans freshly out of service usually go through about 3 to 5 jobs within those first couple years. And so that may make employers hesitant to hire them. However, a good veteran, a good worker is also very, very difficult to come by. And they will stick around if they're treated with accountability and empathy to help navigate through that transition. And so how can leaders balance holding somebody accountable to the task that they've had, but still being empathetic to their situation? Maybe this person hasn't found their purpose or buy-in into the company yet, or maybe they're not meeting their financial needs at home. And so they're having to work a second job as well.
Oh, sure. So as for folks who are hiring military veterans, I tell people this. I'm like, look, you need to be really honest with them because they can handle bad news. They can handle a lot of information. What they can't handle is uncertainty. So if you say, here's this, here's this, here's this, here are the obstacles you're likely to have, and this is what we do about them. That's a good piece of the information. Don't sugarcoat stuff. A lot of organizations also onboard poorly. For example, we will hire technicians for something, plumbers, welders, IT people, and then we put them through 3 weeks of onboarding where we teach them helpful things like don't be inappropriate in the workplace and don't be an idiot and all these ridiculous onboarding things. When And so 3 weeks later, they're finally getting to the job and they've been beat down. Now they're discouraged. They've been sitting in a classroom. They want to be working. And now they're bored and unenthusiastic. So partly we as employers can do a better job overall with onboarding. But the other part is if you're going into a job, you have to understand that one of the things that you do is you train your boss how to be a better boss. You've probably led teams. You know how to be a good boss. You know what you need from your leadership. So train your boss to do that. And we've all had bad bosses. And I'm telling you, bad bosses teach you more stuff than good bosses because all of a sudden you're like, I did have to train that boss. I had a boss who was a screamer. And, and at one point, I called his wife. I said, okay, he is screaming at people at work. Does he do this at home? She goes, yeah, that's just his nature. I'm like, okay, well, it's not okay here in the workplace. He's upsetting people and not in an overly sensitive way, but he is screaming at the top of his lungs in front of 150 people. And now I've lost productivity for 150 people. While I walk among them and go, everything is fine. He's just a crazy person today. Everything is fine. We'll settle him down. Don't worry. And finally I went in and closed the door. I said, boss, okay, we have to have a talk. So a couple things. I want to do a great job for you. And I do. I want to do a great job. But you're making certain things hard. If you want to yell at somebody, I need you to yell at me, but in private. If you are just mad at the world and you just want to yell, call me. I'll come in. You can yell all day long. I'm good with it. Water off a duck. I'm good with it. But you can't yell in front of my people because they think it's somehow their fault and they're internalizing that. And that's not fair. So if you're having a bad day, he always had bad days. Every day was a bad day for him. Please, let's keep it among ourselves. Second thing is you're being very reactive. And that's not good for planning. So I would like to propose what we do is every morning at 6 a.m., I'm going to come in your office and you tell me what's on your mind for the day. And then I'm going to disperse that through the staff. And then we're going to try to solve those problems. And I'll report back to you at the end of the day. And he was like, oh, that might work. Now, this is something he should be doing, but he couldn't. It wasn't his skill set. Okay. But in order to protect my people and the rest of the organization, I was like, okay, I can do that. And then he thought that was so great. He's like, we need to do this every day. I'm like, oh, Lord. So 6 o'clock in the morning, every morning we met, 6 o'clock at night, every night we met. And that diffused the situation. And now, 20 odd years later, he wants to be my friend on Facebook. No, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. We got boundaries. But what I'm saying is we've all had bad bosses and we have to find those workarounds for those bosses. And if you know you need certain leadership things, one of the exercises I encourage people to do, and it works, is you write down the initials of a great leader, Abraham Lincoln, Nelson Mandela, George Washington, whoever, and you write down the leadership traits that you admire about them. And you look at that list, those tend to be the leadership traits you need for yourself. And then if you think of a bad leader, and you write down their bad leadership traits, those are things that trigger you for bad leadership. And all of a sudden, if you know what those two lists are, then you can go to your boss and go, hey, I need this from you. I need you to have more communication with me, not less. I need you to trust me with more information. I need you to give me all the information. I'll figure out what I need, but I need more information than less so I can have a better idea of how to solve the problem. And what I need you not to do is scream at me. And all of a sudden, the boss goes, yeah, we can do that. And you're like, okay. See, you got to teach your boss how to lead. And a lot of people think leadership is something you do for a battalion or a demographic. Gen Z needs this, or this group of people need this. No, leadership is individual. And you can individually train your boss to be the individual leader you need from them as well.
That's great and sound advice, to pass on to somebody in that space. And unfortunately, one of the struggles that a lot of leaders currently face is the rising numbers of tragic suicide rates, especially among service members, veterans, and first responders. What message of hope do you have, Mary, for somebody that is currently battling?
Yes. So first, it's a spiral. It starts like this. We all have ups and downs, ups and downs. This is just life goes in this circle. But then that spiral gets smaller and smaller and smaller like a hurricane, and then it starts to go down. And that's what we have to be careful of. For veterans and first responders, anybody in a high stress job, veterinarians, dentists are all at the top of this list. All of a sudden they think what I do doesn't matter. So me being here doesn't matter. My buddy Frank King out of Seattle, not a veteran, but he said, Mary, he goes, there's something, he's a comedian and he talks about mental health issues and suicide. And he says, Mary, what you don't understand is for people who think about suicide, it's always on the table. And he goes, have you ever thought about committing suicide? I'm like, no. He goes, you've been through some stuff. I'm like, yeah. He goes, you've been through like serious things, like bad things. I'm like, yeah. He goes, and you never thought about suicide? I said, no. He goes, keep in mind for some of us, it's always an option. So we have to take away the option. It's not a viable option. And some people just don't see the possibilities. They don't see the glass as even able to be filled. And part of their brain, I mean, and again, this is these chemical things in our brain. Our brain is a chemical being. And sometimes people resist help because they think it's a sign of weakness. I'm like, hang on, if you need medication to help your liver function, wouldn't you take the medication? Well, yeah, well, the same is true with your brain. Your brain is more chemically dependent on all these things. So let's get you into that place. And for that, I say to folks who are thinking about it, you don't struggle in silence, you reach out. And everybody says that, but no, you have a group of people, really close people who know that if you call and go, I got a situation, they drop everything. And that's who you need. Yes, we know there's the hotlines, there's all those other things, but nothing beats your closest friends who have had your back and known you forever and all of that. But you also, somewhere in your brain, you got to take it off the table. But for leaders, I will tell you that I used to, when I had command, I'd walk around and ask people, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing? And I would get good, great, fine. And I got to tell you, Danny, I believed it because I wanted to. I thought I was being a good leader by walking around, management by walking around. And that was the wrong question to ask. A better question is, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being absolutely fantastic, can't get better, and 1 being, keep me away from tall bridges and buildings. With everything going on right now, where are you? So somebody says, I'm a 7, I'm an 8. Okay, what would get you to, an 8 or a 9? Sometimes it's something stupid like, I just, the way my work schedule is, I can't pick up my kids at school. I need 15 minutes more at the end of the day. Oh, we can fix that. Or my computer is slow, or I need paper clips, or, my dog is sick. Okay, we can help with that. Sometimes it's, I could use bourbon. Okay, we can fix that too. But sometimes it's, I'm a 4 or I'm a 3. Okay, that's all stop. And if somebody says I'm a 2, the world stops right now because they're in crisis and they just don't know what to do about it. The one thing we military people are good at is dealing with crisis. So you don't have to deal with it, your own crisis yourself. We would never get through our own crises by ourselves. We don't go to war by ourselves. Why would we deal with our own crises by ourselves? So if somebody's in that place, you go, okay, let's go for a walk. Let's have a quick chat. Can I get 10 minutes? Let's do a coffee. With some of my friends, I'm like, you get to that place, I will show up at your house with alcohol, because I'm an Irish Catholic. That's how we deal with things. I will get you drunk. We will solve the world problems. We will purge demons, and then we'll put together a plan of action. And this is how I cope with these things. But we got to be open to how they cope with these things. So sometimes it's, I just need to talk through this crisis, or I just feel really overwhelmed, or okay, so let's start carving out those things that you really don't have to care about. Let's start whittling away at the things that are not important, that somehow you've taken on as the weight of the world that you don't have to. Let's go back and help you find your purpose. Can I talk about that for a second?
Please, please.
Okay. During COVID, my niece, who's awesome, decides she wants to be a marine biologist. She toddles off to school to be a marine biologist. She's got a scholarship. Everything's great. COVID hits. She's an introverted kid, and now she's locked in a dorm room, not doing well. Her classes are online. The teachers just threw these things online, so they weren't good classes. She thought she'd be playing with, dolphins, and now she's stuck in a dorm room with a roommate she doesn't really talk to. So after about a year of this, she calls me and says, Aunt Mary, I hope you're not disappointed in me, but I've become, America's most recent college dropout. And I said, oh, kid, I'm not ever disappointed in you. It sounds to me like you need a purpose, not a porpoise. Actually, I actually said it. And she said, I just don't know what to do with my life. I'm like, you know what? I do a lot of strategic planning for organizations. What if I put together a strategic plan for your life? And she goes, what? I go, yeah, let's deconstruct a strategic plan for a company and let's do it for your life. So I put together this thing called Your Personal Strategic Plan, a workbook. And we start with what are you good at? Not like what you want to do for a job, what your values are. And then we deconstruct it. And then we at the very end, we got to what's your vision, mission, world like. But we started with all about you first. What are you good at? What do your friends say you're good at? What do you feel like you're good at? And then what do people say you contribute when you show up? And what are some things you're proud of? And like really getting into you. It's about a 40-page workbook. I'll send you the link. You can share it with people for free. I would love that. And so the idea was find your purpose that isn't dependent on other people or your job or your boss or your friends or anything else. Really focus on who you are, because who you are is pretty amazing. And let's figure that out.
I really appreciate that. A lot of people that do struggle with it. Your friend is absolutely right. Like when it's on the table, it's always on the table because our mind has gone there. And one of the things that I tell people for myself is this is a part of where my mind goes. I've learned to not fear it anymore, but I've developed a strategy on what to do when those thoughts arise. And a lot of the times it is waiting it out with a sober mindset and sharing it with somebody else. And so for yourself, you encourage people to be better leaders, to reach out in those times of help and connect. And speaking of connection, where can people find and connect with you? Because I want to continue this conversation. Unfortunately, we're running low on time, and we've been going, and you just have so much knowledge. And so I want to make sure that people know how to connect with you and where to continue to track all the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. The website is productiveleaders.com, because who wants an unproductive leader? Productiveleaders.com. And it's just Mary@productiveleaders.com. I do answer my own emails. So if there's something that you go, Mary, it sounds like you might have a resource that could help me or something like that. Anything I have is always free to my veteran friends. If it's the business startup book, if it's the personal finance book, it's whatever people need. I'm happy to share that. I have a page of free resources, and there's veteran resources on the page. It's productiveleaders.com/free. And there's all kinds of other resources there. It's a bunch of my checklists and it's business stuff, and it's just a bunch of stuff. So happy to share any of that stuff, because you're right. Once it's on the table, it's on the table. And this is why I tell my friends, once you're married, you never ever think about the word divorce. You never think about it, because once you think about it, it's on the table. And now you're less committed to the marriage you said you were in. So you do not mention the word. You don't let your brain go there, because otherwise your brain, remember, is looking for an easy out. Don't give it the easy out.
Well, I truly appreciate all that advice, and I appreciate your time here on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast. Thank you so much, Mary.
It's been such a fun time, Danny. Thank you all so much.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, please remember you can also catch the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast on Reese Across America Radio, ready for you on platforms like iHeartRadio, Odyssey, and the TuneIn app.